Infor TechTV Live. In this session, we'll be discussing the topic of extensibility, and we'll be covering this with the three guests that we have on the screen with me. My name's Keith Knuth. I'm the Senior Director of Tech Product Strategy here at Infor. I'll be your host for this session. I want to especially welcome our audience from LinkedIn for this live, as we are, for the first time, simultaneously broadcasting on YouTube and LinkedIn at the same time. So if you're not familiar with how lives work, the idea is for this to be an interactive, fun, engaging way for you to talk with us. And we have a panel of experts that will help us understand today's topic. But the really interesting content will be from our live audience. That's you. And you can direct the conversation by using the chat function on the side to post questions and thoughts and talk with us just as if you were here in the room with us. So if you're an Infor employee or an Infor partner joining the call, please keep the chat lines open for others. We want to make sure their questions are given priority. And for everyone listening, please stay on the live to the very end. At the end, we will be posting a free download link to an analyst report on extensibility that provides a third-party opinion on why low-code dev tools are important to extending your business applications in the cloud. Stay tuned until the end for that. But before we go any further, and because this is a live session, I do need to post a disclaimer to keep our lawyers happy. This is a live session. We can talk about anything, including dates and futures. And so anything we talk about, just to be clear, we aren't making any promises in this session. But with that out of the way, let's get to know our experts. First up is Paul Horn. Paul, you going to tell us about yourself?
Yes, as Keith said, my name is Paul Horn. I am the product manager for Mongoose. I've been around the product for quite a number of years, formerly as a customer partner, developer, and now in product management. So that's been about the past 20 years. And before that, a little bit of manufacturing and distribution implementations.
Great. Nice to have you, Paul. Next is Michelle Reidman.
Thanks. And Michelle Reidman, I'm Senior Director of Product Management, and I manage, kind of like the other side of the fence to Paul, I manage one of our cloud suites, Sightline and Cloud Suite Industrial in the Sightline product family. I also came from the manufacturing sector before I joined the services organization. I've been with the company over 20 years and came into the product management team. It's been 2014. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you too. And the last but not least, rounding out our panel is Marcelo Martins.
Hey, everybody. Marcelo Martins here. So I am a technical solutions consultant here at Infor. I've been with the company for a little over 6 years now. I was actually hired straight out of college on the Mongoose team. And then slowly over time, I transitioned to the consulting world where I work with prospects and customers to really educate them on all things Infor OS and our technology. So happy to be here.
And happy to have you too. Your real world experience implementing will be really helpful in our discussions, Marcelo. Okay, so let's jump into our topic for today. Remember that the chat line is open, so feel free to start posting questions to our experts. I will ask that you keep the questions on the topic of code. Remind people that we can't do tech support kind of event. It's too hard. So please keep away from those specific technical issues you might be having. So we had, you can sign up for these lives ahead of time. You can send in questions at a time. So let me start out with a kind of lead question here to get things rolling, and we'll see where we go. But before we start talking about this topic, we should probably define it, some of the terminology we're using. So, Paul, can you give us a definition of what extensibility is, what low code versus no code is, even the term Mongoose and Infor OS may be foreign to some of our listeners?
By all means. So extensibility by its name is extending something, right? So you can extend a business process, you can extend capability. So when we're talking about software extensibility, that's really taking what you already have. In our case, it's usually ERP, and then extending that capability or that business process, or taking advantage of really the most important thing you have and the most valuable thing you have, data. So really using that to augment processes. And where we usually see this extensibility being used, when we go to do implementations of ERP inside of your business, we usually shoot for an 80% fit. And that 80% fit, that's really our target. But you always have that 20%, hopefully less, but you have this area where you need to use some level of extensibility for the specialization of your business. What makes you unique? And we use these extensibility tools to fill that 20% gap. And usually to take advantage of the data that you're storing inside of the application. So you've got an ERP, satisfies a good bit of your business. You want to leverage that information that you're storing on a day-to-day basis, maybe augment it with additional pieces of information that aren't stored inside of the ERP, and then make that available. So that's really extensibility and how we see extensibility with our products. This also extends, though, in that you can have different styles of extensibility. With a product like CSI, Sightline, or Factory Track, it's built on top of the Mongoose framework, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But that is something where we can do in-product or in-place extensibility, where we're making changes to the actual product, but it's upgradable. So that's extensibility within the product itself. Then we have other products in the Infor family that utilize Mongoose as an extensibility framework to extend their functionality, but it's not inside of product, it's outside of product. We call that loosely coupled. So we're utilizing pieces of the integration technology that we'll talk about as Infor OS to really allow for that integration with those other products and enhancement to give you that 20% of that gap fill that you might need for your ERPs for that extensibility solution. And now when we start talking about the actual tool, Mongoose in this case, it is the extensibility engine for Infor. And we are traditionally what we would have been called a full code extensibility solution. And that is, it's a rapid application development framework that allows you to build out, again, extensible solutions, but it also allows you to build enterprise level ERP, such as Sightline, Factory Track, Infor Service Management. Those products are actually built on our framework. Then you can also have no code or low code options within there. So a full code framework that you can code into, but then you put wizards on top of things to simplify that and make use of that full code in an automated way. That gives us kind of a low code functionality, and we'll be looking at a few of the wizards that we've actually added into the product to give us that low code and close to no code functionality. But then when we start looking at real low code and no code, that's when you get into systems that are completely question based. So they interview the user. What type of solution are you trying to build? What are you trying to achieve? And then they output a solution based on that those types of questions.
So if I had to kind of summarize that low code versus no code versus full code, I'm writing in a language. It's Java, it's .NET. That's the type of tool, right?
Right.
Low code meaning I've got a wizard or a helper helping me construct that code that I was doing in full code.
Exactly.
And then no code is full drag and drop. Like I'm just dropping like Legos onto the screen, building something with just.
And even more so, you're actually getting questions. You don't really see a builder per se, right? Like we're all very used to, again, that drag and drop experience, but a no code is really something where you don't even get to see how it's built. You're picking templates, you're selecting items, you're being asked questions about how do you want to build your solution, and then it builds the solution for you.
Oh, interesting. So you used a couple other terms there as you were explaining the terms I asked you for. You used even some more new terms, framework and platform. Marcelo, maybe I ask you to jump in. What do we mean when we talk about framework versus platform? I know we have Infor OS and Infor, which is our technology platform, but now we're talking about an extensibility framework. What's the difference there? How do those work together?
I might actually pass this one back to Paul, if you don't mind.
Sure. So when we talk about framework, Mongoose is a framework. It is a framework for building out solutions. And that would be, the framework is Mongoose itself. You can build out, like I say, an enterprise class style ERP like CSI, or you can build out extensions to applications, or build apps, or build widgets, or anything like that. That's built on the framework. The platform is actually the thing that services up those applications. And in our case, it's Infor OS. So it is kind of where we socialize our applications together. We also talk about integration. We have integration tools that allow us to integrate one product with another, and also to communicate to the outside world, whether that's in the cloud or even on premise.
That's good. So how, if that framework is Mongoose, is our low code framework, that's how you develop, how does that different than just writing an app in Java or .NET in those native Visual Studio or the type environments? Why would I choose this versus going native like that?
Again, it's that rapid application development. If we're going to write something by hand, and Mongoose is not, even though we will claim to be a full code solution. When I was a kid, it was no code, it was low code, because it was a drag and drop tool. It is something where it's a rapid application development framework. It's something that you can build an application quickly and easily, but it's not as maybe as simple as a no code solution, where we're literally asking questions as to how do you want the solution to be built.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll reach out to our audience too. I see we have over 150 people on, I think, LinkedIn and YouTube. So please post your questions out there in the chat. This conversation is meant to be driven by you and answer the questions you have about low code, no code, extending solutions in the cloud. We get a lot of questions from customers on, gee, I moved to the cloud and now I feel like I'm locked in. Like you run the applications for me in the cloud. How do I change them? I don't have access to the source code anymore, right? So I'm sure there's questions out there. I'm going to fish out there for our viewers. But along those lines, are we only talking about extending existing Infor apps with like new screens or new reports or new features? But or are we talking about, what if I want to write a whole new app? Like Infor doesn't even sell what I need, right? Infor doesn't provide what I really need to run my business.
How about we go through, and I can share a screen here, or at least we'll try. Let's look at a few different things that you could build, or what would you do, with Mongoose itself. Let's start here. So we're actually at CSI, or Sightline, if you will. It's, again, that ERP that's built on top of the Mongoose framework. So something that you would build, or something that you have inside of there, is maintenance of your customers. So we'll open this. And I have my customer screen. I can navigate. And I can navigate my customers, so I can view my information, on the screen. But now, so again, we've developed an application. This is actually a vendor level application distributed by Infor, and used by thousands of customers every day. But I want to make a change to this. So my example would be, I have a spreadsheet of information that a salesperson is providing, and currently today they're just maintaining it themselves. We call these islands of information, but we want to be able to share that information, and we want to integrate it in with our application, in with CSI. So I can use Mongoose inside of CSI to go and build out a very, very simplistic form. And it's really just a basic grid, right? That has a customer number. It's got the year, a period, a budget amount, a gross margin. Again, something that you would just maintain as if this was a really, really basic spreadsheet. And of course, you can build more complex applications than this, but this is kind of a simple example of what we would normally go through. And we even threw a little filter up top here because we have different years of information that we want to maintain. Of course, that doesn't really integrate the two together. So there is this in-place extensibility that we have within CSI because of Mongoose, and it is built on that framework, that we can extend it, we can add in functionality. So we can add in a tab and we can bring that form and put the form right into the customer's form. And we can maintain those budgets. And you'll see as I navigate, they navigate in context with that application. So again, this is a solution where we're making changes inside of the application, but you can also do this exact same thing outside of the application. So I'm switching over, and this looks very similar, but Mongoose comes again as a SaaS platform for our software as a service for our development groups that can distribute vendor level code or product within Infor. But we also offer platform as a service. And this is our extensibility side. So the application that you see here is utilizing the CSI customer information, but it's utilizing it by reading through our data lake. And then it's presenting that exact same subform that we showed in the CSI area over inside of Mongoose PaaS. So this would be an extensibility solution, but this is loosely coupled because it's utilizing that information through our data lake that's been published from CSI. So it's a little bit different situation, but same sort of information.
That's a really good example of extending the existing ERP with something brand new, right? Michelle,
Sure.
Marcelo, you want to add on to that at all?
Yeah, I was going to say that, so these two examples, and when people think about the possibility here, the first one is within the application itself, which we're built on Mongoose. So it's an extensibility tools and components within that. Like, let's say we wanted to do a new report. We'd go through and generate a report builder within the application. But the other use cases, really powerful in connecting through to any of the Infor components. You mentioned Data Lake, Paul, but also connecting to other sources via our Ion API layer, right? So building a no-code application, serving that up in SaaS that you develop yourself, and connecting to other elements and other components in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I think you're right. That ability to be integrated with the rest of the platform, right, is really important. And this isn't a standalone development tool, that it's integrated with everything. And kind of along those lines, we talked about CSI, and I'll help our viewers who aren't educated in the Infor lingo. CSI is our Cloud Suite industrial solution for industrial customers. Sumya, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, from LinkedIn comes in and says, is this relevant for Infor LN as well? So again, I'll explain. Infor LN is a part of a solution for our industrial, automotive type industry customers. And so the answer there, I can answer that one. I don't, but you guys can jump in. Yes, right. This is relevant for that as well. And again, because in the cloud, Infor OS, and thus this low-code platform is part of Infor OS, and Infor OS is part of our cloud suites. You get this platform as something that's available to you. Anything you guys want to add in?
You covered it.
Okay. Robert comes in from LinkedIn and asks, how does the platform integrate with Mach style apps? MACH. That's actually an acronym I don't know. Do you guys know what that one is?
I gotta admit, I don't know that one either.
Robert, follow up on your. Yeah, Robert, follow up
unless
with your
it's for
post.
machine integration, which could be.
Yeah, Robert, follow up with your post there and help us out with that acronym. You need to teach us something new there. Faisal comes in from LinkedIn and says, what are the capabilities for personalization and extending applications on a SaaS platform? So I think you gave a couple examples there, but maybe you guys could all kind of fill in with what you've seen in the field, kind of the things customers have built in the cloud.
Yeah, and I guess I'll start because really that is our bread and butter in this. That platform as a service is in the cloud. So it's cloud safe development, which is a very unique thing. There are very few products out there that allow you to do that level of cloud safe development where you can actually go in, manipulate objects, manipulate data, those types of things. And, you know, again, Mongoose is a great example of that. We've seen customers do things like maintain drawing lists outside of the system, integrate with other pieces of software as well, where they combine two sources of data, one being the ERP and the other being potentially another system that they deal with. We've seen it as black box applications as well to do mapping and transformation, although that's really not our thing. And of course, you could be using, you know, the tools that we have inside of Infor OS for those types of things as well. You know, you can use Mongoose to build widgets, which is another option. So you can build small pieces of functionality, because a Mongoose form is really just, you know, you make a small Mongoose form, it's a widget. And you can put that functionality in there as well. You can also combine the functionality so that you can respond to things in context. And if I can just share out my screen again, why don't we look at an example of one of those? So where I had shown the budget information before, inside of CSI, if I hit this little chevron over here, I get this linked area, and this is our in context area of Infor OS. And this is a widget, this customer budget widget. This is actually running from Mongoose PaaS. So where we showed that PaaS solution before, again, that loosely coupled solution, that data is being maintained inside of that other Mongoose solution, but I'm referencing the information inside of CSI. So as I navigate CSI, I can see that information change over in that in context area. The beauty of this is, and it doesn't just have to be CSI, this could be for the other products in the Infor family, like LN and M3 and CSD. Those applications all send information. Whenever you click on a record, it's going to transmit in context information. And unfortunately, you can't see it on this one, but it transmits in context information. In this case, it's sending a key value, customer. And that customer value then gets picked up by the in context widget and then looks up information and filters for it. So that's another way of using Mongoose as an extensibility solution to your ERP without modifying the ERP. And that's a really important thing, because whenever you make changes to your ERP, of course, it does limit what you can do from an upgrade perspective, right? Because you're making changes, you're customizing. CSI has a little bit unique world in that the changes, like adding this budget tracker inside the product, is upgradable. We have upgradable extensibility inside of CSI. But for other applications where you want to do this type of in context or do some other, again, augmentation of your data or of your information, you can do it in this manner without making any kind of core changes to the application.
Okay.
Paul and Keith, I'd like to just kind of pick up on a question that's come in, and it's talking about, this is from Fredolin on LinkedIn, and they're asking about the user interface. And I thought that's a really good thing for us to talk about a little bit, is the ability for our solutions here to reflect the experience of the applications that they are connecting to, that they're working with, as well as being specifically tailored to the user persona that you're building that function for. So first things first, of course, our Infor design standards and our components. We're using those standard controls and components, so you're going to get right out of the gate a consistent look and feel across your ecosystem. But maybe we can talk a little bit about the UI, about just to kind of throw that out there for some discussion.
Yeah, the user interface definitely is a consideration. Mongoose does utilize the exact same tools again, from our design system. So we get a consistent look and feel. It doesn't mean that you can't design outside of that. And we are actually addressing that, not just in Mongoose, but with other tools that we're looking to develop now. Really to give us a bit more guidelines, kind of some bumpers, so that you kind of stay inside the lines when it comes to doing design and interface. So that's one bit. We are looking to make changes there, and we are actually developing a new product that specifically only addresses that. It only uses the libraries that we have available to us from the design group.
Yeah, I always thought it was one of the strong points of Mongoose is the ability to change and adapt that front end layer, right?
Sure.
One of the strongest points of it, right? At least for what
Absolutely.
you can see on a screen. And so, while it's good to eventually build in some bumper walls and keep everything nice and safe, that is a true power of Mongoose, I would say, is to be able to make it look and feel however you want, right? From simple things
Sure.
like colors and fonts and sizes to obviously layouts and the way that the information is presented.
And let's not forget too, with those personas, we may have some different things that we need to do. Also, the controls and connections, validations for single sign-on and security models, connecting into that space, as well as then there's a number of use cases where if you're wanting to build an app, let's say that's used on an alternative device. Not everybody is on their laptop or a desktop, and we may need some flexibility there in terms of the connection method and the real estate that they have on their digital device.
Sure. And we'll maybe talk about mobile in a minute, but just to go back to that point of UI, this is a good example. And we also to talk to the security of information. This information here is actually coming from M3, and it's live M3. We're actually hitting the M3 APIs. This is a Mongoose application, and it's navigating price lists. Price lists inside of M3 are presented as a parent price list and then child, but you have to go generally from the parent, display the parent first, and then drill into the child. Whereas Mongoose does have this capability of doing a parent-child relationship where you can see the information live between the parent and child at the same time. It's a different UI. It's just a different way of viewing the information, but it is M3 information, and this is live right out of their API. So we're just building on top of the same layer that M3 uses for their display. And again, utilizing Mongoose in a loosely coupled way to connect through our API gateway to M3 to display this information. It is also carrying with it all of that user security. So I actually have to have the security to see this information in order to display it. So if I didn't, it would pop up an error message saying you don't have access to this information.
So it sounds like,
so even though I'm building extensibility.
To summarize that a little bit, and to go back to a previous question, why don't I just write Java, or why don't I just write .NET and build my apps the way I've always done it? You're really showing the power here, right? One reason is
exactly
the UI comes out looking and feeling like the rest of the Infor apps your users are using. That same icon, same buttons, same font, same everything if you want to, right? But also that it's layered on top of the same security rules. It's layered on top of the same interfaces and workflow engine. All that kind of integration is built in, right? Versus if you were writing this on your own, you would have to figure out how to integrate all that to it.
No doubt. I would also contend that this probably isn't a color selection that we would put into a product, but,
I like
so
teal.
just to demonstrate
I like teal.
that
That's
Well,
it is possible to kind of walk outside the boundaries a little bit too.
That's right.
and Paul, you touched on a few things here, which was developing inside, right? Doing an extension to an application versus doing something that's loosely coupled versus doing something that is a standalone. And so there's some questions about connectivity as well as like what's the license model. So maybe we can address that a little bit, and we'll hit a few questions, Keith.
Yeah. So going back to Robert's question about a term we didn't understand, he was asking about microservices. Is it possible to integrate with microservices? Is what he meant. Anyone want to cover that one?
Yeah, and I suppose from a microservices perspective, it depends. When we're in the cloud, of course, we're within our domain. But if you have another publicly accessible domain that we can utilize from within the API gateway, potentially, that would be a way to interact with something externally, some external microservice. But the microservices that we contain actually are within our own domain.
I think he was asking external there. Yeah, so just register them in our API gateway, and we can interact with them just as if they were our own, right?
Exactly.
There was another integration question around Power BI. I would ask our producers to maybe pop in a link to our past live on our data fabric, part of the same platform that we're talking about here. That's a great way to push and pull data, as well as the API gateway that we just mentioned. But you might want to watch that data fabric past live to talk about kind of big data, data warehouse type data, and how we integrate. Any other thoughts on Power BI? Did I cover it?
I'll jump in here real quick and I'll mention that it really follows the same strategy that we use with all of our other products. And when we talk about them leveraging analytics, and that is that Mongoose, whether it's your standalone application that you built, has the same ability to push that data in semi-real time to the data lake, which Keith was mentioning. Our prior call went all into that around data fabric. And then from there, that information is accessible, and you can disseminate that out to other analytics engines or our own. But I would say Mongoose is no different, right? Whether it's your standalone app, we have the same capability to push that data into the Infor Data Lake, or externally using Ion as well.
And Marcelo, I think that also connects with a question that came in about support for third-party like extensions and integrations.
Yeah, so I'm assuming the question is around can Mongoose support them in that respect, like third-party add-ons or something to that effect?
Thinking of that connection, the integration and extending, right? So as using the Infor Open Network, using Ion APIs, right? Doing the normal calls, that validation, the secure authentication, all of that, we provide that plumbing and pipe to allow the communication. And then, Keith, I think that since we're on that topic, maybe we can talk about the deployment methods. Like, say, for example, you have a system that is on premise, right? Can you connect? How do you connect the environment? How do we have the different data sources and pull that together, whether it's bringing it in, ingesting maybe into data fabric, or it's a simple call to that environment? Paul, Marcelo?
Yeah.
Again, Ion API being probably the main one. If you're talking about APIs, they do have to be publicly available in order to do that. Or I suppose we can do it through, we also have Enterprise Connector, which does allow us some level of being able to connect to those things.
Clarify, publicly available meaning they don't have to be open, like anonymously accessible.
Yes.
They just have to be addressable across
reachable
across the internet, right? So you can have private access. We have very complex and robust authentication mechanisms to other systems via RESTful APIs. But Faisal Hashmi, I think is how you say it, on LinkedIn, was asking about these kind of integrations. He was also asking about cloud versus on-premise. And you guys mentioned, Ion and the Enterprise Connector. Can you explain about kind of how that works? And I think, again, that's really powerful that this is part of a bigger platform, right? You're not just getting a low-code development tool or a full-code development tool. You're getting a whole suite of tools to handle that, like that integration with Data Lake or the integration with other apps, on-premise or cloud. Can you just talk about kind of that, how that suite works and how that's accessible within the tool?
Yeah, so I'll add my 2 cents on this one. And Keith, you bring up a really good point, is that marriage of being part of Infor OS and Mongoose. So we leverage every single service that the OS has to offer, right? So it starts with security and the ability to already have single sign-on in place, and that carry through for all of your users and groups to your Mongoose application. Then it extends into user experience, which you've seen firsthand from Paul's demonstrations around things like in-context widgets or the ability to surface those forms on a home page. Then beyond that, it's things like the integration engine. So direct ability to either communicate with Ion or leverage the Ion API gateway, where all your Infor APIs are already registered, and the ability to register third-party APIs. Mongoose has access to that, right? And again, everything I mentioned before comes with it. So we don't have to worry about authenticating our token when we call that API. OS is handling that for us, right? So so the next one would be Data Fabric, which again, we have a built-in integration to that. We can push and pull. We can read data from the Data Fabric directly into Mongoose. And then there's the ability for Coleman and AI, which is a very exciting topic. I think that was our last call, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's an integration there as well via that API layer to call out to Coleman and leverage the services there. And then last but not least is extensibility, but that's all about what Mongoose is. So,
And to your point, Marcella, I think one of the really important topics has been data fabric. That's where we've seen the most leverage, because really using products like M3, and as you saw, I had that pricing example earlier. Hitting M3 APIs is a wonderful thing, but you can also overload that stuff, right? Because once people discover I've got access to my data, they can actually take down or do some real, slow up the systems, because they're obviously they're after large amounts of data, usually to summarize, etc. So by publishing that information in an offline mode and near real time, they can still take advantage of it, but they don't have to access through those APIs,
Right.
which I think is a really important thing. And all of the products being able to push information into that centralized hub for information and then make use of it with a tool like Mongoose really gives you a lot of leverage from a single source. And we do that. We have tools built into Mongoose that can easily leverage that information. And I'll even preface that to say maybe you might have a demo we can show.
yeah.
Were you leading Marcelo to show a specific?
I was.
I think
Absolutely
so.
can.
I think so, Marcelo. While Marcelo was doing that, Terry Dickens, he asked an interesting question. He's talking about the grids and the power of the grids. You mentioned totals, but what about filtering? Okay. Expressing the information to the user and providing the ability for them to hone in on the information that they're looking for. Filtering is possible, right? So depending on, you should be able to filter on the collection, and all of that's possible in how you construct your UI for that particular use case.
Absolutely.
From a Mongoose perspective, whenever you build any kind of data source or connect to any kind of data source, you can then filter that data source from within Mongoose. So that's kind of an advantage that's built into the framework as it is.
Right. And that doesn't require any extra formatting and structuring. It's basically pull that in and that comes with it.
The beauty of Mongoose is that everything you build is FCRUD. That is, if you're building a solution inside, you have the ability to find, create, read, and update information automatically without having to build any kind of IO to a database, etc. That's built in. You essentially build a solution on top of our existing or brand new databases, but built with inside the framework.
All right, Marcelo.
As I think Marcelo is going to show us.
Yeah, Marcelo, explain us what you're showing here.
Okay, so I'm live in my Mongoose environment right now, and what I've clicked on is what's called the runtime builder. So without even having to leave the screen I'm on, this is a great example of that no/low code ability. And so again, kind of like how Paul said, it's going to ask you some questions. What would you like to build? And so I've got different categories. In our case, we're going to work with an external data source, so I'll select that. And then you'll notice there are two options in the dropdown. The first one is the Data Lake Wizard, or essentially I want to build an application over the Data Lake, or I want to use the Ion API Gateway Wizard, again, to pull in either Infor or external APIs. For our example, we'll do the Data Lake Wizard. And
Marcelo, can you just kind of hit a control? There you go, Control Plus or something. There you go. Yep.
Yeah. Let me know if that's a little better, Keith.
That's much better.
That's
Thank
better.
you.
Oh, right. Perfect. Okay. So that brings up the wizard, right? So what I need to do is, again, it's kind of asking me some questions. It wants to know what object in the data lake I want to build over. And so for my example here, I have some essentially legacy order data. So it's order data that maybe was before I came to the Infor cloud. And so I populate it and put that into the data lake. I maybe still have requirements to review that data every now and then, or from a compliance standpoint, I've got to pull it up in a report once a year or something like that. So I've stored it in the data lake. So all I have to do is select my object. I have to click this button to get the schema that's doing all the fancy work behind the scenes of grabbing everything from the data lake, of the structure and the key columns and all of that. And then once that's done, I should just be able to hit the next button, and that will actually create the data object inside of Mongoose. So
to clarify, just for newbies coming into this
sure.
call, the data lake is an object or file-based repository, right? It's not a relational database that Infor provides that all its applications replicate its data to, but actually any other application can replicate its data to, right? It's that one-stop shop data repository in the cloud that you can get data out of. And you didn't build a connection to it. That connection from your development tool to that data lake was just there. And the ability to read objects from it and get their schema was just there. You're just configuring it on which one to read.
That is exactly right.
Okay.
And so let's do that. I just hit next. It's going to ask me one last set of questions. It's going to ask me what I want to name this object on the Mongoose side of the house, and can also give it a caption, right? So we'll just call this legacy orders as a simple name. You can also associate it with a project for organizational standpoints, and then hit finish. And that's it. It's going to go, and it says, hey, it was successful. Would you also like to make a form over this, or essentially a screen or a front end? And so, of course, I do. I want to be able to visualize this data and have my Mongoose application. So I'll hit yes. That brings me to the next wizard, and that is the form builder, right? And so we'll keep this one simple. I have some options here, but I just want to build a full form to interact with this data. I'll hit next. And then I can have different templates that I can choose from, right? So it may just be a standard grid with all of my information in Excel type format, or maybe I want a little more with a responsive design and navigation available. So I'll select that one, and then I'll hit next. Then it's going to ask what properties from the data lake do I want to show on this form. Maybe not all of them are relevant. And so in that case, I do want pretty much everything from the order. So I'm just going to quickly tab over everything that I had from before and hit next, and then hit finish. And now it'll take a second, but my end result will be a fully functioning.
It knew what to ask you there, because again, it was already integrated with the data lake, our data fabric. It knew the data from the data catalog. It knew the schemas, so it could just provide all that to you. You didn't think ahead of time for this demo, right?
Nope, I didn't set up anything ahead of time for this demo, except for long ago I put that data in the data lake, and that was it.
Okay.
So Marcelo and Paul, to use this, to execute this, there's some questions. I think we have multiples. We're asking about the accessibility of the tools. Like, do we need to license this for developers? What about end users? What's the licensing model look like to leverage these components?
Right. So for Mongoose PaaS, which is our external extensibility, essentially the tool today is licensable by customers, but we are including it in an upcoming release for licensing. Essentials, Pro, and Enterprise users will have Mongoose PaaS available to them by default. So it will be included with the Infor OS licensing. So everybody's going to get it, which is kind of cool. And essentially, then you can make use of it, either accessing again through Ion API, through the API gateway, or as Marcel has shown with the data fabric, provided you have licensing for data fabric and you are pushing data to the data fabric. So,
but there's licenses for developers, right? And there's licenses for users, right? And what we're saying is that if you're one of our cloud customers, you're getting trial licenses to go play with this and build what you want in your cloud by default. But then if you want to go into production with it right now, you would just buy a production license for it. But we want to try and make it easy for people to go and play with this and build things and see what they can do, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So into our future, it will be included as part of the Infor OS, and with varying runtime and developer licenses included as well.
Marcelo,
Now-
you said something interesting there. You said, of course, we want to build a form on this data as well. But actually, for the question that was asked there, maybe you don't. Maybe it's a headless application. Maybe you want to, somebody asked about building an Outlook plugin that calls a Mongoose application. Can you talk about what the options are there?
Yeah, and that's kind of like the hidden example that everyone forgets, right? Is sometimes you're not creating a front end for your user, and you're really managing, let's call it logic, inside of Mongoose instead. And there's multiple of reasons for that. Sometimes it actually happens inside of Infor sometimes, right? Sometimes you can't extend the native Infor app in the way that you want to, or to write all that logic would be too much time and effort, and standard product doesn't support it, but Mongoose can. And so why don't we have a headless application, essentially an API call where we give Mongoose some information and it does all of the, it may call out to other applications, it may do some calculations, it may run reports or things of that nature, and then provide that information back. And that's a really good use case around being a headless application. It doesn't have to be an Infor app as well, right? This could be your external Excel plugin, or any external app that you can think of that can essentially call out to Mongoose.
That's all facilitated through the API gateway, right? RESTful API calls, OAuth 2, very secure in the cloud. It's all there, right?
And actually, in an upcoming version, so we just came out with an API generator last year that allows us to create strongly typed APIs. Traditionally, Mongoose allowed you to. We have a REST system. But it is something where you have to, it's self-described. So you have to query it for, what data sources are available, what properties are available on those data sources, and then query the data source for those properties, which made it, it's a multi-step process. And it's not something where you just go and say, show me all the orders, right? So we created an API generator that allows you to create those strongly typed APIs that say get customer credit limit, get vendor purchase order, those types of things that you could build within the API generator.
Yeah.
The version 2 of that is going to give us full FCRED capability. So we're going to be able to self-generate all of the FCRED for every IDO, for every intelligent data object or data source inside of Mongoose as well. And again, any product that's based on the Mongoose framework also gets that capability.
Yep.
And it's extensible, which is even more powerful.
Let me jump back to some questions here. I want to thank Daniel on YouTube for answering some questions, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
That helps us out. There's a lot of questions coming in. There were a couple questions about comparing this to M3. So again, for the non-Infor folks, M3 is part of our distribution enterprise solution. But for our cloud suite distribution enterprise, and that with whether it's an Infor application or a third-party application, there's always usually some kind of tools built into the app to do some extensibility, right? I can hide a field, I can change a label on a field, I can do things. And in M3's case, they have H5 scripting, right, to do some pretty more advanced things with a screen. But how does that differ from what you're showing here?
Again, we're talking about loosely coupled extensibility in M3's case. So we're not manipulating M3 screens. We are building augmented forms, augmented functionality outside of M3, but taking advantage of M3 data, M3 APIs, M3 data. So we can trigger M3 processes. We can read in information again from the APIs, from the data lake. And then we can manipulate that information and send it back to M3 as well if we wanted to. But again, it's all at arm's length. It's kind of that loosely coupling of that information. We're not actually making changes to M3 source code functionality at all.
I think what we said earlier too, right? You can build whole new applications, right? Whole new databases, APIs, forms, everything instead of just
Mhm.
changing the
Mhm.
existing screen.
Mhm.
Exactly. You could have something that's completely standalone. So if I was to go, let's look at something that is completely on its own. So this Acme budgets, to go back to another budgeting thing, but and I'm going to do a reload on
And
this.
Paul,
And
while you're doing that, so Terry gave
yeah,
us a clarification of his grid question. So I'd love to hit that. So what he's talking about is really when you're getting into how the information is presented on the grid, like with the columns, can you do additional filtering there? Right. And that to me sounds more like a data view-ish when you're returning your result set in a data view and you'd like to allow the user to do a little bit more work.
right. Can you do slice and dice,
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
simple summation of information and grouping, etc.
Mhm.
So you mentioned data views. Data
Mhm.
views is part of Mongoose, and it allows you to connect to those data services and then build in that grouping, kind of that Excel grouping and summation type functionality that you can use. You can also, kind of turn it on its ear as well. It gives you kind of a crosstab functionality. You can utilize that. So that is functionality that's built into Mongoose, and again, available to not only the extensibility solution, but also to the products based on Mongoose. It's not full BI, but it does give you some level of BI-like tools that are contained in.
That was a question earlier too about, well, how can it do reporting and what's the security around those reports? Here's an example, right? You built a whole new app. This isn't an
Mhm.
Infor application. This is from scratch, but the data could be
Right.
coming from somewhere else, and you could be constructing basically a report off this that the user could change. It looks like through that grid control that Michelle was just talking about. And can you
Yeah,
can you
exactly.
print
Like
it
you
from here?
could,
Can you do that type of reporting?
probably not. You could actually have an icon up top that allows you to click that, and it's going to go and generate a report.
Right.
And we can look at a report if you want, as far as building something that would be very similar to that. But yes, this is a standalone application. This is kind of a different paradigm, even because it's got modal boxes that pop up. But again, Mongoose allows for different methodologies and different ways of managing information and displaying information.
Okay. We got a couple questions from people who are current Infor customers. And here from
Mhm.
Adam on LinkedIn, he says, I'm a Infor Factory Track customer. I have Admin Studio there. And so it's for everybody else, that's a Infor app that's actually built using this tool. So we build some of our own software using this tool. He asks, how is that different from the standalone Mongoose application?
I can take that. So
Sure.
effectively, the answer is the same for Factory Track, for Sightline, for Cloud Suite Industrial, for anything that's based on the Mongoose framework. So we offer up our users, so your Factory Track users and administrators, but you would have the same ability to extend with inside the four walls of that application, like the example that Paul used earlier. So really think of it as two sides of kind of the same tools. You have the extension capability within application, and then should you want to build something that is a loosely coupled or standalone to do something totally different. So you've got both parts of that kit available to you.
Mm-hmm. So the full application more for building those whole new things, whole new ideas, right? Versus some of the tools that are baked into our products more for the extending what you have
Mhm.
already. Okay.
Exactly.
Call out to Pad Macaron. I'm butchering that name. I'm sure I am for answering a question. Thank you very much. And Nishanta is a question for Marcelo. Marcelo, when you showed the Data Lake Wizard previously, was that for localizing Data Lake data into a Mongoose database, or is it for directly getting data from the Data Lake? What does it
Right.
do with data that it gets?
So it's an excellent question, and you can do both actually. So, but the end result that I built is actually keeping the data in the data lake. We make an API call at runtime, take the data back and surface it on the form. There's also an option during that setup wizard, a little checkbox, to replicate and localize it into Mongoose's SQL database as well. And so both options are available.
Great. Thank you.
And further to that, you can actually update that information on a periodic basis using our application event system in the background as well. So if you want to keep that data up to date on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, you can set up that to happen.
And Keith, maybe let's circle back to the third-party integration question. There's been some clarification there. So for example, if we want to connect with a third-party best-of-breed solution, right, what's our strategy? Like connecting to an alternate CRM system like Salesforce. What's our strategy? Well, the strategy is, that's where we get to the platform, the Infor Open Network platform, to connect to Ion, and then that serves as the communicator to your Infor solutions. So for example, the Infor Cloud Suite is going to share the information through Infor OS, through Ion APIs and business object documents, and then to connect to the Infor OS platform as a connection point.
And I think there was a question about the enterprise connector as well. Does anybody?
Mm-hmm.
I think that ties in tightly with what you were talking about connecting to third parties. The enterprise connectors for connecting to on-premise third parties, a vendor or something you built. Anybody want to talk about how that works?
Yeah, I can touch on it. I mean, it's under the Ion umbrella, right? But in terms of integration, but the enterprise connector is it's actually a relatively small footprint application that you would install locally. And when I say locally, I mean from the non-Infor perspective, either locally on your premises or it could be hosted somewhere else, right? But not in the Infor cloud. With that in place, then you're able to reach out to anything on that network, right? So we could talk to a local shared folder, a database, a local API in that network, et cetera, and bring that information to the Infor cloud ultimately.
Great. I think we're getting through most of the questions. If you missed anything of the initial part of the presentation, this will be recorded and available online. So make sure you check out the recording to catch up if you're coming in midstream. You've only got about 5 minutes left. I guess I'll just maybe let a couple more questions come in here if anybody's got them, but maybe wrap up with this one. If people are looking for a low-code platform, they're in the market for this type of tool to build new applications or extend what they have. What kind of features, what are the big things they should be looking for from a vendor?
Definitely I think the biggest ones are going to be things like SSO integrations, where like that ability to construct something that works with your existing products, right? And obviously we are baked for Infor, so that's maybe kind of where we're a little bit biased in that manner. But again, because we've got SSO built in so that we receive all the same roles and responsibilities that you get from that are assigned to you within your ERP, we can maintain those as well inside of Mongoose, and we can build applications around them so that if you're an AP clerk and you've been given AP and we want to make sure that payables data that's transferred inside of a Mongoose solution is only accessible by you, we can pay attention to those exact same roles that have been assigned through IFS. That would be the Infor Federated Services. So having that integration is definitely important. It secures the data and makes sure that you only have access to those pieces. Additionally, building out something that looks and feels like any other product that you have. You want to make it, your users don't want to have a completely different solution, something that doesn't look and feel like the software that they're using every day. And then, of course, being able to leverage the data internally. If you've got to do some extra hoops in order to get a hold of data or manipulate data, again, back to the example of an Excel spreadsheet. It sits off in a corner, and on some network drive somewhere, accessible by one person usually. You want to be able to share that information easily, and that's Again, you want to be able to have access to that data and make it available to others. And again, build security around it so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands.
Thank you, Paul. I'm gonna
I
cut us
wanna
off there
add-
because we're nearing the end of our time. I'm sorry, I feel like a talk show
Sure.
host here, cutting people short. But I promised that I would give out something for those that stayed on to the end of the session, and that was a free analyst report from Nucleus Research, talking about what you should be looking for in a low-code platform and how Infor may provide that. So if you scan the QR code, let's see which way am I going? I don't know. Whichever way to that QR code on the screen. There you go. Point to it for me. That'll take you to an Infor link that gives you free access to that analyst report from Nucleus Research. And I think you'll find that really valuable for those out there that are in the market. With that, I'll end the session and thank our panel for their time. It was very much appreciated. To get notified about future lives like this, and I encourage you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our corporate LinkedIn channel. There will be more coming. Thanks for watching and have a great week.
Thank you very much.